unmute. I'll start.
Could you send me the links to one so I have it?
You're
not on the chat?
So we'll add you to the chat. Yeah.
He's not on the chat.
So we'll put him on the Yomi chat.
He's on the line.
We have like 7 or 8 WhatsApps. We're going to blow up your phone. Don't worry about it.
No, we don't have to.
I'm joking, Rabbi. We're on 2.0 already. The regular Yismach chat. The Yomi's still on 1.0. I don't even know about the Yismach crazy chat. Is there another chat that I don't know?
No, Yismach.
The regular Yismach chat. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yismach 2, Yismach info, and
Yismach info is the only one that's not chaos because you curtailed the ability.
Nobody can find it.
Oh, no one can talk anymore. Yeah. Why? We used to blow up your phone.
Yeah, we have two different ones.
Okay, everyone's here. Let's get started.
Yeah, the two right here. Yeah. One here, use mine.
Oh, yeah, we got many.
I got a box of Gemara.
Okay. So, Masechta Chagiga is the last Masechta, at least the way we have the Masechta set up in Seder Moed. Chagiga primarily discusses 2 things. So, just like Moed cut in the last Masechta, the first half of the Masechta was all of the halachos of Chol HaMoed, the malacha on Chol HaMoed, what you're allowed to do, and then the second half was Avelos, Elu Megalchin, the famous, however you want to say it, Perik. Now, Chagiga in a similar way, broken up really into 2 topics. It's really one topic. It's 2 parts of one topic, and the topic is what's going to be discussed right away from the first Mishnah, the halachos of Aliyah L'Regel, right? So we know that there's 3 Gimel Regalim. You have Pesach, Shavuos, and on each one of them, in fact, someone want to just give me a chumash. Yeah. So you have the Gimel Regalim, you have Pesach, you have Shavuos, you have Sukkot, and on each one of the Gimel Regalim, we're going to see in it that there's certain karbanos you're supposed to bring, and you have to be seen in the Beis Hamikdash by Hashem. And each one of those karbanos are going to be discussed really in the first half of the Masechta, up till through like the Daf Yitzai, the Ches area. And then after that, the second half of the Masechta is going to be discussing Tumah and Tara, the laws of Tumah and Tara as it relates to the bringing of those karbanos. So we'll hold off on discussing the Tumah and Tara that we need. It's just going to make this conversation unnecessarily. And when we get to that part of Masechta, we'll have like Hakdama, a second Hakdama to that section. And let's focus now more on what's going on here in the beginning of the Masechta, the first 20 or so block. Okay, so I just want to open up a couple of psukim just so we have context for the mitzvahs. Yeah. Now these psukim show up really sort of all over the place, so I'm just going to pick 1 or 2 spots where it comes up. So in Mishpatim, the parsha from a couple of weeks ago, Mishpatim Chaf Gimel. Here we go. Chaf Gimel Mishpatim. Let's open it up. Here we are. Chaf Gimel Yidal. Okay, so the pasuk over here says like this. It's in the middle of talking about the Gimel Regalim.
Probably for Shalosh a fish.
Yeah.
It says like this. Mishpatim. But it's in Mishpatim, it's in Kisisa, it's in Re'eh, it's in Emor, it's in Bay, it's in a lot of parshas discuss the Gimel Regalim, and in many of the places by the Gimel Regalim it discusses the mitzvah of Re'iyah, but specifically Mishpatim is a good place to discuss it. It's a more emphatic pasuk. Okay. V'chol asher amarti eleichem tishameru. Everything I've told you, you shall do, you shall watch. V'shem elikim acherim leisaski. Okay, fine. Shalosh regalim tachoig li bashana. The 3 regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, tachoig, we'll say it's celebrate, li bashana, right? Every year you have to celebrate those 3 yomim tov. Then it says es chag hamatzos, we'll call that Pesach. Right, so it says over there, Tishma Shivas Yom Teichel Matzis Keshetzi V'Sichel like Hashem commanded you, v'chulu v'chulu. Then it says at the end of the pasuk, Kivo Yotzasam Mitzrayim, because it was then that you left Mitzrayim. V'lo Yeira'u Fonai Rekam, you shall not be seen by my face, Rekam, empty-handed. In a moment, what that means. V'Chag HaKatzir Shavuos, and then it says V'Chag HaOsif, which is Sukkos, and then it says Sholosh Pa'amim B'Shana. 8 times of the year. Yeroeh kol zechurcha, all zechurcha means zachar, means male. All of the males, zechurcha means your males. All of the Jewish males, yeroeh shall be seen. That's the way it's read. The nekudas, which if you open the Sefer Torah are not there, you would just see yud resh al, and we'll see in the Gemara the significance of how to read it versus how it's written. Yeroeh, they shall be seen. El pnei ha'adon Hashem, by the face of your master Hashem. So this is the mitzvah of what we call Aliyah Regel. We call it, so basically the mitzvah, the way it works out is 3 times a year, every Jewish male has a mitzvah to go up to Yerushalayim to be seen in the Azara by Hashem. That's mitzvah 1. There's a second mitzvah. The second mitzvah, which is the pasuk I mentioned before, the pasuk said at the end over there, it said, "Lo yeira'u fanai re'ka," you shall not show the regel, you have to also bring a carbon re'iyah. It's a carbon re'iyah. Now, so we'll get to that in a minute. Yes, it is an oila. I want to sort of break it down so that as we move through these topics, we have all of the definitions, the terms clear so that it's not confusing. Okay. There's also a second mitzvah. There's a second carbon that we need to bring. So the pasuk said, I mentioned it before, it said, Sholosh regolim tachayg li b'shana. It happens to be, this is the pasuk I have open, so I'm going to read this one. But tachayg, this lashon of chag, which we use like chag sameach, chag, good yom tov, the way we use the word chag is sort of like as a celebration or as a holiday. So Chazal understood, we'll see in Gemara, is that from that pasuk of chag, they understood that there's an implicit commandment of celebrating it in a very unique way. It doesn't just mean, having parties, although it could be that's one way to do it. There's a specific din Torah of a chagiga. When we use the lashon chag, and that's where the Masechta's name comes from, chagiga, it's referring to a second carbon. So we mentioned you have aliyah l'regel, and then you bring a carbon re'iyah. Okay. Now I'm saying besides that carbon re'iyah, there's a carbon chagiga. Okay. The carbon chagiga is a separate carbon. So that carbon chagiga, and you see it throughout all of the psukim and mishpatim and in Emor and in Re'eh and all of the different places that all of the Gimel Regalim are talked about. We'll see you have this idea of chagoisem, chagoisem oisei chag la Hashem. We're constantly using this word chag. It's referring to the carbon. Then there's a separate mitzvah. This is the fourth mitzvah of Yantiv, which we all know about, which is the mitzvah of Simchas Yantiv. We always talk about it, right? Sukkot, Yismach Sameach. The mitzvah Simchas Samachta b'chagecha. So let's read that word with this new understanding of what the word chag means. Samachta, be happy, b'chagecha. Doesn't just mean with your holiday. It means be happy with your chagiga. Yeah, no, right? Yes.
Bringing the kabbalas?
Yeah. So there's a fourth halacha besides being seen in the Azara, besides bringing a carbon re'iyah, besides bringing a carbon chagiga.
Just to be happy.
Then you have to be happy on Simcha.
Yeah.
Just to be happy.
Yeah.
Now, this mitzvah to be happy, which is a wonderful mitzvah, we understand that there's a specific physical way to do it.
No.
Min HaTorah, the way one is Mekayim, the mitzvah Simchas Yantiv, is by eating basar carbon. Basar HaKarbon is the way one is Yotze, the mitzvah Min HaTorah of mitzvah Simchas Yantiv is by eating basar carbon. So this is an important fact that's going to come up today. It's going to repeat it often throughout the Masechta. Right? So on Yantiv, Min HaTorah, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, you have to bring karbanos, re'iyah, but besides that, you had a mitzvah to also, every single day of Yantiv, you had to eat flesh from a carbon. Now, let's just work this out. So we have these 4 mitzvahs. There's one other piece that we have to understand. I'm not going to give a whole hakdama to Hilchos Kadshim and karbanos, but we're going to speak about 2 types of karbanos. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I need you to bring karbanos, you could bring a chatas, you could bring an asham, you could bring a taida. There's a million different types of karbanos you could bring. But they really effectively fall into 3 categories, right? Category 1 is you're doing it because you did something wrong. Asham. I'm going to leave those on the side. We're not discussing this today. We'll get to them when we get to them. Then you could bring a carbon oila, or you could bring a carbon shlam. Oila and shlamim really are the 2 categories we're discussing. And fundamentally, the difference between an oila and shlamim, there are many differences, but the way you need to understand it is like this. You show up to the Beis HaMikdash with your animal, and this is true for all karbanos. Someone does the shechita, you could do it actually, but usually the kayan does it. And then from that point on, everything that's done with the carbon is done by a kayan. The kayan, after the animal's shechted, the blood comes out of the throat, it's grabbed in a kli, in a vessel. That kli, holding that blood, is walked over to the mizbeach. Each carbon has like very unique specific rules. You spritz over here, you spritz over there, you walk around this way, that way, 2 times, 1 time, 4 times. We're not discussing that. We'll get to the 5th parak of Zvachim, and we'll discuss those halachas. Well, Yuma will come back around, but when Zvachim, we'll get to the very specific halachas of how that works. But as it relates to us, there's an ola and a shlamim. Everything's the same right up until the point where they do the spritz, right? Once they do the ola does this way, a shlamim does that way. What happens with the body of the animal? So an ola comes from the language going up. It means the entire animal, minus the skin, is completely burnt up as a carbon. It's let to burn through the entire night. You wake up in the morning, the Kohanim would come in and take the dust.
Why not the skin, though? Why?
The skin is given to the Kohanim. It's like one of the matnas kahuna. It's one of the rewards that Kohanim get. They get to the usable part of the animal that we would want to use in terms of eating. No one eats from the ola. The ola is completely burnt up. It's an ascetic. It's an ascetic carbon. It's a carbon that has no involvement of any human contribution. Whereas a shlamim, what's referred to as, in maybe old English translations of the Chumash, is a peace offering. That's where it comes from. Shlamim, right? A shlamim is the opposite of an ola in this sense. The shlamim is eaten. In fact, a portion, I think it's the chazav v'shok. It's like the right side of the animal, the leg and the foreleg and the foreshank. I forget which exactly. That part of the animal is given to the kehanim, and the entire rest of the animal is dismembered, and the meat is butchered, and it's given to the owner of that shlamim to take and go and eat it. And the rest of the animal is burnt up on the altar. Okay, so we have an ola and we have a shlamim. Ola is completely burnt. Shlamim is eaten. Now, the eating of that shlamim, you can't just take it home and come back to Woodmere and sit down and make a suda. There's a rule about where the meat from a carbon shlamim is allowed to be eaten. It can only be eaten inside Yerushalayim, and there's a time limit on how long you can eat it for. You're not allowed to eat it just whenever. In fact, the rule is you get 2 days. So if I bring a carbon on a Monday, I can eat it Monday night, and Tuesday. At the end of Tuesday, once Shkia taste hits on Tuesday, that meat, the leftover meat, if you eat it, you chayiv kares. It's called noiser. Literally, leftovers is normally a good thing. In karbanis, it's not a good thing. Leftovers is a big problem in karbanis. So, again, let's take a step back.
Do you burn it then?
Yes, it's completely burnt up. It has to be taken out from the Beis Hamikdash. They take it out. There's a special place where they bring, and basically sort of like a sanitation area where they would take all the stuff from the Beis Hamikdash and they would burn it up, anything that wasn't used. So now, let's go quickly step back. We have 4 mitzvahs that are related to this Masechta. Going to the Yerushalayim and being seen in the Azara, Aliyah L'Regel. You have to bring a carbon re'iyah and you have to bring a carbon chagiga, and then every day you must eat from the meat of a carbon. So let's work this out. The first carbon, the carbon re'iyah, that's an ola. That's completely burnt up. You must bring that once over the course of Yantif, ideally on the first day. If you can't bring it on the first day, we allow you to bring it on some of the other days. The carbon chagiga is not an ola where it's completely burnt up. It's a shlamim where you eat it. So you eat your carbon chagiga, okay, and you eat it for 2 days. So that means I bring my carbon chagiga, let's say on the first day. So now it's the second day of Yantif. Let's say I could take the leftover meat that I have from my chagiga and I could use it the next day, and I could use it to get my mitzvah simcha. What do I do the next day? I can't use my chagiga anymore because I'm only allowed to eat it for 2 days. So what do I do for the next 5 days? Well, if I have a son who's over bar mitzvah, well, he has to bring a chagiga. So I can bring his chagiga on the 3rd day, and then I can eat his meat on Thursday, on the 3rd day with him, and the 4th day. And if I have 2 sons, I could do that on the. You could do that. Oh, can I now? Wait for my brother-in-law.
What kind of animals are typically brought for the
bulls, rams, sheep? For a shlamim, you could basically do anything. I think an ola is a little bit more limited. I think a shlamim, it's not only any animal, it's any age. With an ola, it's a little bit more specific. But yeah, in fact. Oh, so
we got birds also.
We'll get to birds in a minute. So okay, so the carbon re'iyah is an ola. So we're going to. This term is important. We're going to repeat this term a lot. It's an olas re'iyah. Olas re'iyah. I'm going to sear that into our brains. We'll be referring to the olas re'iyah a lot throughout the Masechta. The carbon chagiga is a shlamim. So we're going to say that's a shalmeis chagiga. So we have the olas re'iyah and the shalmei chagiga. The olas re'iyah is completely burnt up, and it's a mitzvah to bring that carbon when one arrives in the Azara. And then there's a separate mitzvah to bring a Shalmi Chagiga, which is a carbon I bring once over Yantif. If I don't bring it on the first day, I got to bring it on the 2nd day. And everyone above the age of Bar Mitzvah is chayiv in each one of these mitzvahs. Okay. Now, the 4th mitzvah, the mitzvah of Simcha, which we say is you must eat the meat of a carbon. Well, what happens if it's me and my wife and my Bar Mitzvah age son? It's the 5th of Sukkot. We finished all of our Chagiga meat, or it's nice, so we can't eat it. What are we supposed to do now? I'm visiting Yerushalayim. I got no family and friends here. Well, I need to now go have carbon meat. I don't have any other carbon meat. What am I supposed to do? Every day you have to have more carbon meat. So I have to bring a carbon, meaning I have to bring what's referred to as a shalmei simcha. Now, you do not have a chiyuv to bring a shalmei simcha. If you're able to orchestrate it, if you're a guy like Cal, you're a chevraman, you know a million guys, then you're going to be able to go, I'll eat by him Wednesday, I'll eat by him Thursday, I'll eat by him Friday, and I could get my carbon. Be done.
Because it's not Yantif anymore.
No, because it is Yantif. I must eat this meat on Yantif that's from a carbon. But I don't have to bring the carbon myself. to eat it. I can get invited to his house. He's having, let's say he's got 10, he's bringing chagigas all week. So he's got chagigas up the wazoo. There's going to be a ton of meat. You talk rams and goats and sheep. His house is the place to be. If I go eat by his house, as long as I have from that carbon meat every single day, I'm yotzi my mitzvah of simcha. Okay.
Is there a way for a coin to meaning his portion is only able to eat by Kohana? Is there a way for his
to give to, let's say, Yisraelim? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Not 100% sure. Okay. So again, 4 mitzvahs, going to the Azara, Olas Re'iyah, Shalmei Chagiga, and the Shalmei Simcha is optional because you may not need to bring an actual carbon if you have enough meat. But if you don't have enough meat, you have to bring a carbon. Okay. That would be...
So I only get the chest and the right thigh.
Yes,
And
the
the
chaz of the
chagiga
show.
says.
Correct. Okay. That is the beginning of this Masechta. Now, when I mentioned the pasuk of mitzvahs, Aliyah L'Regel, I quoted the pasuk as follows. I said, Shalosh pa'amim b'shana, 3 times a year, Yera'eh kol zechurcha. Zechurcha meant male. So you can already hear that if I asked you, is a woman chayiv in this mitzvah, you would say, no. The pasuk is talking about men, not women. So I would say women are not chayiv.
I think they are.
So we're going to get to the Mishnah. We're going to see the Mishnah in a second. Right? So I'm just pointing, there's already a structure. Okay. So let's start from the Mishnah and let's learn a little Gemara together. Hakol chayavim. Hakol is a very generic statement, implies everyone, and then the Mishnah is going to continue to say Hakol, except the following group of people. Hakol chayavim b're'iyah. And here the word re'iyah is important. Re'iyah here means which one of the mitzvahs of the 4 mitzvahs I mentioned in the Dhamma are we referring to here? So Rashi tells us right away. Rashi says Hakol chayavim b're'iyah b'mitzvahs re'iyah zechurcha, the pasuk I just read. The mitzvah that every Jew, and we'll see in a minute, every male Jew has to be seen in the Azara, the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel, that is being discussed in this Mishnah. Doesn't seem from Rashi that he's talking about any karbanos. It seems from Rashi that we're just discussing the very first mitzvah. But we'll read the Mishnah and see exactly. Chutz mi cheresh shota v'katan. Cheresh shota v'katan, in general, usually means a person who can't hear and can't speak. We'll see this in the Gemara on the base. Shota, a person who is be acting in a way that he doesn't have common sense, meaning not just simply no common sense. He has no sense at all.
Liberals nowadays.
Could be. I'm not. We're recording, so I don't know where this is going, and I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to be canceled. Us and Joe Rogan, baby, we're not canceled.
Correct.
Right? If a cotton and a cotton who's on the bar mitzvah. So the first distinction here is a chereshot, which throughout Shas I think shows up 180 times or so. The phrase chereshot v'katan, 180 times throughout Shas, give or take. With tumtum, a tumtum. What's a tumtum? A tumtum. This is. I mean, you could literally
not a male, female, right?
No,
So-
it's born without.
tumtum is either a male or a female. It's just you can't tell. If you were to look at that place, it looks like a Barbie. They have an area. It's like covered.
Got it.
Okay. So now the Rambam says that if a person were to have that skin torn, or nowadays if a person were to get surgery, and we could see what they are, then they're what they are. Meaning the Rambam's not. You're not v'mitzius a suffix. We just don't know. But if we could know, we would want to know. The next one, an androgynous, which is a Greek word, androgynous, it just means a person who's born with a male and a female genitalia, and perhaps even male and female internals. I don't exactly know how the medical part of that works out, but the point is, androgynous is by definition a suffix. We don't know if it's a man, we don't know if it's a woman. A tumtum is one or the other, we just don't know. I know it sounds like a difference with that meaning, but really there is a difference. I mean, obviously, if we cut open the tumtum's area, he goes and gets reconstruction surgery in that area. If we see that he has beitzim and he has a gid, he has a normal aver of a man, then we know he's a man, and then he has a chai mitzvah to go up to Aliyah L'Regel. If we see that he doesn't, then he's not chai. That's a tumtum and that's an androgynous. You could literally find one politically incorrect comment to make after another in this entire Mishnah, but we're gonna go back to Vinosh. It said called zechurcha. Zechurcha said males, so males are chayiv in this mitzvah. Vinosh are not. So again, we're in the Mishnah listing the chutzes, the things that are the exceptions. Everyone's chayiv except the following. The list is pretty large: a chereshot of a katan, a tumtum, an androgynous. Now we're saying v'noshim. Now the avodim she'ena mishuprarim. An eved. What's an eved? An eved's a slave. So there's 2 types of avodim. We're not going to go too much into it, but the avodim that we're talking about here is referred to as an eved knani. An eved knani is a guy who becomes a slave. The halacha is eved knani is a little bit like a ger. When he's taken into the home of the Jew, who now quote unquote owns the work that he's doing, he gets a milah. He has to go to the mikvah, and he's chayiv in mitzvahs the same way a woman is chayiv in mitzvahs. Meaning, he can't eat treif. He's not chayiv to put tefillin on. Why? Because tefillin is a mitzvah saseisha as man grom. It's a time-bound mitzvah, just like women don't have that mitzvah. It doesn't have that mitzvah.
There's a mitzvah to daven.
He has a mitzvah to daven, minat Torah, min brachas, v'pashtus. He has nothing different than a woman, except for those mitzvahs that were specifically given to women. Whatever mitzvahs those are, he's obviously not nayig nida, right? Whatever it is. But the point is that he halachically has the same status as a woman. So if a woman is going to be pater, so then so too an eved knain is going to be pater. The interesting thing here is in the Mishnah is, what does the phrase va'avadim she'ena mishuchrarim mean? If I were to say to you a slave that's not free, that seems to be. If I tell you the word slave, it means he's not free. If I tell you someone who's not free, you know it's a slave. What does it mean to say someone is a slave who's not free? The implication is that there might be a quasi status where you're an eved, but there's some elements.
Wasn't a slave looked at as someone who was taken care of, though?
He may have very well been taken care of, but we wouldn't call him free.
There's a Mishnah in Adias.
Slaves didn't consider themselves not free, though.
It could be, but in halacha, they're bound by the requirements of their baal.
But there's a Mishnah in Adias that said that if two brothers own.
So we're gonna get there. We're gonna get to that in a minute. Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, Lisa Love. I
Like, she love you?
texted. I know her for a long.
Okay.
So her husband is the Rosh Yeshiva here.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Do you have Rosh Yeshiva in the shul?
And when
We give him a nickname.
I see. So she knows, like,
it's a big Talmud
I'm
Chacham.
like in by Yismach. I mean, yeah, he's on
It's a big
sabbatical.
Talmud
I'm sure.
He's in Eretz Yisrael.
That's
It's
what I'm
huge.
Okay. Says so again. So the
Try to give
Mishnah.
him cover.
So the Mishnah
Right.
says as follows: the avodah ena mishuchrarim are also pater, right? So again, cheresh shayte v'katan, tumtum and androgynous, they're all going to be enoshim v'avodim she'ena mishuchrarim. That's the part of the Mishnah that excludes anyone who is not male or male adjacent, right? You're a woman, you're an eved who is like a woman, you are an androgynous or a tumtum. We don't know what you are. You're going to be pater because you're not a man. Noshim, cheresh shayte v'katan, you're pater because you're not chayiv mitzvahs. A person under the age of 13 has no das. A shota has no das, and we'll see in a moment on the Yom Beis that a cheresh also halachically maybe we'll say has no das.
A what? What was that lesson?
A cheresh, a deaf person. Deaf and it means deaf and mute.
Mute.
Yeah. Okay. Chagiga. What's a chigar? A chigar is a lame person. Person who, let's say, is paralyzed or for whatever reason he can't walk. So it says, we're going to see in the Gemara that this mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, why is it called shalosh regalim? Why is it called legs? Because of the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel. The reason why the shalosh regalim are called regalim is because we're supposed to be able to walk up to Yerushalayim to go to the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, regalim means legs. So therefore, if you don't have legs, or if you can't make the trek, then the halach is your pater. You have no chiyuv mitzvah. And again, what I said from Rashi is what's the discussion in the Mishnah? It seems we're talking about the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, not carbon necessarily, just the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel. So hachiga, a person who's lame, he can't use his legs. The hasuma. Okay, so summa is an interesting one. Summa is a person who's blind. So you'll say, why is a summa? We'll just say balabatish. Well, if you can't see where he's going, he can't make the trip. The hachayla, a person who's sick, is too sick to make the trip, can't make the trip. The hazakin, and an old man, even we'll see with a cane, without a cane, how's he getting there? What's he doing? And again, the point over here is that these are all different forms of a human being who, from his own personal physical situation, is exempt because he can't go up. Now you'll say, you can jump in a cab, you can take, okay, we're not having that discussion. But the point over here is, the Mishnah is telling us that you're excluded from the mitzvah. So who's chayiv in the mitzvah? Men who can move and who are over 13, can hear or speak, and aren't stupid. I mean, that's effectively who's chayiv in the mitzvah. When I say stupid, I mean not a shota. Yeah?
Wait, wouldn't aliyah regel would imply that you wouldn't be able to hop in a cab? You'd have to go by foot?
No, I mean, it's a good point, but no. I mean,
cabs back then?
No, a wagon. So you're allowed to go in a wagon, but the requirement to go is only set on those who could theoretically go out the wagon. Oh, okay. Continues the Mishnah. Which seems to be a throwaway line. We just basically went through all of the people who can't go on their own. Why am I saying this? The Gemara will explain. Okay. First part of the Mishnah is done. Ezehu katan. Who is a katan? Now I would have said, what do you mean Ezehu katan? A katan is someone who's under the age of 13 or under the age of 12. The Gemara says no. Mishnah says no. Kol she'eno yachal lirkov al kseif of shel aviv. Anyone who can't go on his shoulders, his father's shoulders, v'lalos Yerushalayim laharabayas, and make the trek to Harabayas. Divrei Beis Shammai. We'll finish the statement and explain. Beis Hillel argues and says, no, what's a katan? Kol she'eno le'echos b'yodei shelav. If he can't hold his father's hand, v'lalos Yerushalayim laharabayas. Why? Shenemer sholosh regalim, because it says that this mitzvah is talking about sholosh regalim. He needs to walk, and therefore, if he could walk on his own, he's considered chayev, whereas if he can't, he's not. So just Aleph Bezel here. What the heck did we just read? 2 seconds ago, I said Chayav Shaitav a katan is pater from the mitzvah, and now you're telling me over here that a katan is chayav once he reaches the age that he can go on his father's shoulders according to Shammai, or Beis Hillel will say that no, only when he's able to walk on his own without any help. So which is it? Is a katan pater or is a katan chayav?
Both.
Right. So what we'll see, Rashi will explain. Rashi says over here what the Gemara Mishnah means to say is as follows, and the Gemara will flesh this out, that a person who is a katan under the age of 13 is pater min haTorah from the mitzvah of alila regel because he's not chayiv in mitzvahs. But just like tefillin, just like lulav and esrog, there's a mitzvah chinuch. A father has a responsibility to teach his kids how to do mitzvahs. Therefore, how old? Just like if I were to ask you, do you put tefillin on your 4-year-old? Of course not. He has no clue what's going on. You wait till he's getting close to bar mitzvah age and you start putting tefillin on. But my son makes brachas, so there's different ages for different mitzvahs. When we're going to do that mitzvah, it's all dependent upon when that kid could wrap his head around exactly what it is you do, right? So when is the mitzvah to teach a kid about Shemitah? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's probably very close to bar mitzvah. Maybe it's 3 weeks before the bar mitzvah because he's not going to understand it anyways. Whereas when do you tell him that there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you say Shema Yisrael and Reishis Chak Mir Hashem, you do that right away. So the mitzvah's chinuch starts at different ages, and every mitzvah has its own shiur. What's the shiur for Aliyah L'Regel? Beis Shammai says, like he always does, a little bit more of a chumrah. He says from an earlier age. What's that age? If he could sit on your shoulders without any help, that's good. So figure 2 years old, something in that range. He could sit on your shoulders. He can make it. Beis Hillel says no, he's pater from chinuch. When is he chayiv in chinuch of his son? Once he reaches the age that he can walk on his own without constantly saying, Tati, 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 pick me up, pick me up, pick me up. Meaning if he can make the trip on his own, so you're talking already about 8, 9, maybe 10 years old. I don't exactly know. It could be those generations, kids were a little tougher. They could probably make the trip a little younger. I know my son, even walking to shul, he wants to hold my hand.
They have their own obligation at each carbon also.
The problem is.
Oh, fantastic question. That's a fantastic question. It's a fantastic question.
Do
they have a chiyuv to bring a carbon?
Their own carbon.
Yeah, fantastic question.
My question is more amazing. Is it his father has to offer a korban on his behalf?
So his question and your question really, meaning at the end of the day, if he's a katan, if he has to bring a carbon, his father has to bring a carbon. Meaning the whole reason why he would be going is because it's a mitzvah chinuch. So that would literally be like me giving. Let me ask you in a different way, in a more relevant way for us sometimes. Do I have to buy my son an esrog for on Sukkot? Could I buy him a lemon? I mean, he doesn't know the difference.
No.
Why not? Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I'm just saying
because what the mitzvah is the esrog, not the lemon.
Right, because the mitzvah is esrog, right? So what's the mitzvah here? The mitzvah here is to go up to the base to be seen by Hashem and bring a carbon. So if that's the mitzvah, do we say that mitzvah's chinuch is said on the going up the carbon, or is it only on the mitzvah's aliyah l'regel? This is a fundamental question. Tosfos asked this question. It's the biggest, the big Tosfos on the bottom, and it's dependent on Yerushalmi. Tosfos says the one mitzvah is dependent on the other, and therefore, if you're pater from the mitzvah aliyah l'regel, you're pater from the mitzvah's carbon. If you're chayiv in the mitzvah aliyah l'regel, you're chayiv in the mitzvah's carbon. There's no way to be chayiv in one and not chayiv in the other.
And it goes through this
and therefore, the chinuch is going to be the same way. So just like not simcha. Could be simcha. We'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of bringing the carbon for the katan,
dependent on
same thing. If you're chayiv to do the mitzvah's chinuch in Re'iyah, then he's got to bring the carbon Re'iyah. And if he's not chayiv in the mitzvah chinuch because he's 4 years old, according to Beis Hillel, no carbon. Rashi's not mashma that way. Rashi seems to say, if you take a look at the Rashi, Beis Shammai, which is a little bit ahead, we haven't read it yet, it says, Gadol haba lihiros tzarich lahavi ola. Who brings the carbon? A gadol. A katan, meaning, and Tosfos touches on this issue later on, as Tosfos says, a katan can't do other things, he can't do smicha. I don't want to get too much in the details, but Tosfos basically points out, but it's still not going to be a perfect mitzvah, because there are other reasons why a katan's mitzvah is not going to be full. He says it's close enough. So Tosfos is acknowledging it's still not going to be, meaning, by esrog, do I have to buy him an aleph esrog? Does it even have to be a kosher esrog? Can it just look like an esrog? If it's an esrog, can I go to the guy, the S seller before Sukkot and say, listen, just give me a couple of puzzle esrog. I got 4 kids. They don't know what's going on, but I want them to have the mitzvah. They don't understand what they're going to open up the lulav and start looking at the thing that's kosher. No, they have no clue. But to them, it's yellow and it's got bumps and it smells. That's the mitzvah for a 4-year-old. You know, maybe my 11-year-old, my 12-year-old. Maybe I'm going to take him to the cellar and let's take a look. You know, where's the black dot, right? Each mitzvah has it. So over here also, Tosfos points out that even though you're not going to be doing it the right way, it's close enough, but you'd have a chiyuv to bring a carbon. So that's a pretty expensive thing. Having kids is not cheap, right? Not only do you have to go and bring your family up, once your kid reaches a certain age that he can walk on his own, not only do you have to schlep and pay for flights for him, you got to pack in the bags all the animals you're going to be bringing. A very expensive mitzvah, 3 times a year. Okay, continues the Mishnah. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have an argument about what exact age does the chiyuv chinuch start. And I know we're slow going through the Mishnah here, but trust me, it's gedai to really flesh out these ideas.
What happens if the cotton is teaching the gadol the mitzvahs?
That works.
My son's teaching me.
There you go. You're both chayiv mitzvahs. Though. Yeah, no, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay.
The captain picks out a $200 etrog and a $20 etrog.
Well, if he's smart enough to know the difference, then I would say buy it for him. But if he...
True story, it happened to me this year.
There you go.
That happened to me too. I brought Samson, we were looking, and he picks out the $200 one.
Yeah, that's why you got to know how to walk around the store. We go to the toy store. He starts walking. The outside aisles are always the most expensive because that's where all the fancy stuff is. You always got to go. You got to go to the middle. Where all the whatever. Okay, so that's the second part of the Mishnah is the mitzvah chinuch, which we'll get to a little bit, and the third part of the Mishnah is, and this is what Tosfos uses to make the argument that the Mishnah is talking not only about aliyah l'regel, about being seen, but it's also talking about carbon, because the Mishnah continues and says the following: Beis Shammai oimrim hareiyah shtei kesef v'chagiga ma kesef. I'll read it and explain. Beis Hillel oimrim hareiyah ma kesef v'chagiga shtei kesef. So we're already mentioning here the karbanos. Clearly we're discussing the karbanos, and what we're saying is minimum amount one is allowed to spend. You cannot spend less than the amounts mentioned here. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have an argument which one is supposed to be more expensive. We won't get too much into the details right now of explaining the different types of coins. There's a ma, there's a zuz, there's a sela, there's a shekel. We're not doing that now. I can barely do American currency, let alone Bitcoin and all this other stuff. So I'm not going to explain to you the difference between a ma and the point is a ma kesef is 1 and shtei kesef is 2. So 2 coins are 1 coin. What's the minimum? They argue about which one. Does the olas re'iyah, does the shalmi chagiga get the higher minimum? We'll see the Gemara in a couple of that. Okay. So again, what does the Mishnah say? 3 basic points. Who's chayiv in the mitzvah and who's pater? Then the katan that's pater, but he is chayiv mitzad chinuch. What's that age? Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue. And then the third discussion in the Mishnah is what is the minimum amount one must spend on the karbanos he's bringing up? And externally, we had a conversation about is the Mishnah in general talking only about the mitzvah of being ola regel? And what's your name again? Aaron asked, is that true of a carbon also? If we say the katan is going to be chayiv, is he chayiv to bring the carbon? This is a machlokes rishonim. The pashtus between Rashi and Tosfos. Okay, says the Gemara. It said in the Mishnah hakol chayav, and everyone's, and then it went and listed everyone who's not chayav. So ask the Gemara hakol, and they find this throughout Shas in general. Whenever there's a Mishnah that says the word hakol implies like it's adding something even beyond what's stated.
The hay, right?
Right. So it could be from the hay. It could be just from the fact that it says hakol. It could have just said
Call.
It could have just said Anoshim chayovim, or it could have said Misha chay b'ri'iyah. It could have used another lashon. Hakol is seemingly some sort of an inclusive lashon that tells us that it must be coming to tell me a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to go through 3 possibilities of who is chayev that's not mentioned in the Mishnah, and depending upon which one, we're going to see each one has some reason why maybe we don't want to say that. So let's go through it. Hakol la'asuyei mai. What is it coming to include? La'asuyei, it's including me, who shechatzi of eved ben chayrin, which is someone, a human being, who is both at the same time, half of him is a slave and half of him is free. How does this happen? Very simple case. Let's say you have a person who owns an eved knaini and he dies. He has 2 kids. So his 2 sons, they inherit this eved. So they both own it, let's say 50-50. And one of them saying, you know what, hey, I could use a couple $, he decides to free the eved knaini and the eved knaini works it off, whatever. So now this guy, part of him been freed and part of him is still encumbered by his status as a slave to the other brother. Now, you should know, halachically, you're not allowed to free a slave, right? So what the brother did was not really, I mean, the way it comes out halachically.
You can only go when? If by Shemitah, you mean?
Yeah, he goes free. Yeah,
or Yovel?
No, that's by Eved Ivri. Yeah, Eved Knaini is forever.
Why can't you free a slave?
You're not supposed to free him. I don't know.
You want to go get
I don't think so. Yeah, no.
Is it
But if
dafka
he is
ba'ovid?
freed, he's completely, then he's chayiv in all the mitzvahs. Yeah.
If he's dafka Eved Kanani or any Eved?
No, Eved Knaini, Eved Ivri.
Not Eved.
You
Not
can't
Eved,
be half
no,
free. You got to be
meaning
either free or not.
Kanani implies.
Oh, you mean just
you can be half free.
Eved Knaini is just a phrase to refer to non-Jew. Yeah.
Oh.
Kev, you can be half free is what we're saying. Not
Yes,
He's saying you can't be half free, either free or not free.
No, so he's
You work one day, not work.
Oh, so we'll get to that.
Right?
Yeah, we'll see in the Gemara today. Kaifan said it's Gemara in the bottom of it. So okay, so Chatzi Avid Chatzi Ben Chayrin. By the way, Chatzi Avid Chatzi Ben Chayrin is a mental fodder for many achronim because it makes it for a very enjoyable topic for you to understand how halachas apply to him. Is he allowed to marry someone? Right. So let's see him marry. Let's see have a Chatzi Avid Chatzi Ben Chayrin. Is he allowed to? We'll see another base. Is he allowed to marry a Jew? So the halacha is that the part of him that's free is the part of him that's not.
Doesn't have to convert. He doesn't have to convert.
So is he even allowed to? Is he even allowed to? Because the part of him that he's a slave, he doesn't have freedom to do that. So you start to really, Tosas and other Rishonim start talking about a Chatzi Avid B'Chatzi Ben Chorin is they're trying to come up with ways that maybe he can. Well, what if he marries? What does he say? Let him marry a mamzeres. Why? Because then he can. The part of him that's a Jew would be allowed to marry the. What does he say? It says the Eved will be allowed to be with the mamzeres.
Yep.
What's a mamzeres again?
Mamzer.
They're born out of wedlock, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the
Colloquial, yeah.
Any one of the averas, the sexual averas that one does that you chayiv kares or misa. What's that?
Right.
Happens to be it's not, but that's the English term that people use. Yeah.
It's not big enough for
Yeah, you're talking about Ashes Ish. Yeah.
Or
No, Yeah. Okay. Well, let's leave that. We'll leave that topic for a different time. Okay. So it says in the Mishnah, Hakol asuyei mai. It's coming to teach me that a chatzi avid chatzi ben chayrin. Now, why would I think a chatzi avid chatzi ben chayrin is chayiv or pater? Well, it said in the v'avadim she'ena mishukrar. Now all of a sudden that language is starting to feel a little bit more appropriate, right? It says in the Mishnah, who's chayiv? Hakol, except avadim, slaves that are not free. And I said it was a redundant language. Avadim she'ena mishukrar. But maybe now we could sort of say, what does it mean in the Mishnah? Avadim, slaves that are not freed completely, but maybe if they're freed partially, they would be chayiv. Right? And Hakol is including those people. But the problem is what do I need Hakol for? That would be in the Mishnah already. Right? The Mishnah is clearly saying that Chatzi Avid Chatzi Ben Chorin, let's say, would be Pater. The Mishnah says everyone's chayiv except this quasi Eved. Part of him is free, part of him's. So according to Ravina, we're going to see in a minute, Ravina holds that he's Pater. Right? So let's see. How could you tell me Hakol is coming to teach me Chatzi Avid Chatzi Ben Chorin? Uli Ravina, according to Ravina, who says, the Amr, Misha Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin, in Ariya, he holds that he's Pater. It cannot be coming to teach me him. You can't tell me he's chayiv, and then Ravina comes along and says he's not. And the way the Gemara presents this is a little bit deceptive, to be honest, because Ravina is not like an opinion that others argue. No one argues on Ravina. We'll see in the Gemara later on. Ravina's opinion is everyone's opinion. No one over there argues with Ravina. So the way the Gemara is saying it is a little bit soft. Really, what it should say is, what do you mean? Right. No one holds that a Chatzi Avid Chatzi Ben Chorin is chayiv. Right? Mm-hmm. So, but the way the Gemara says it, okay, fine. You want to tell me Hakol is coming to teach me Chatzi Avid Chatzi and maybe Ravina is what? Arguing on a Mishnah? Okay, so then Hakol, what is Hakol coming to teach me? Hakol la'asuyei mai. The Gemara says, la'asuyei chiger b'yom rishon, then ispashet b'yom sheni. So what did we say in the Mishnah? We said you have to have the ability to walk up to the Beis HaMikdash. If you're a chiger, you're lame, you can't. Now what happens if you broke your leg and then it healed? So you broke your leg, you couldn't walk on the first day, but now it's on the second day it healed. So you have a chiyuv to go up or not, right? So the Mishnah says lame. So does that mean like a full lame, like lame the entire week, or no, even if you're only lame for one day, you're done. So what we're saying is, if you were lame on the first day, but you got healthy on the second day, we're saying you're chayiv to go, and Hakol is coming to include that guy, because you might think, well, maybe he's pater because he couldn't go up on the first day. Kamash on our Mishnah, no, he has to go. Gemara says that's not good. Why? Because Hanicha, that only works Laman Damar according to the opinion. That holds Kulan, that all of the karbanos of Chagiga and Olas Re'iyah are Tashlumin Zelazeh, that when I said before that you're supposed to bring it on the first day, but if you didn't bring it on the first day, you can bring it the second day. If you didn't bring it on the second day, you can bring it on the third day. They understand that each day gets its own new obligation. So if I didn't do it yesterday, Hashem says, do it today. If I didn't do it today, Hashem says, do it tomorrow. Every day has its own new obligation.
They're not contingent.
Exactly. However, you say, according to the opinion who holds Kul and Tashlum Derisha, that really, what am I doing on the third and fourth and fifth day? I'm fulfilling my obligation that occurred on the first day. Well, if on the first day the guy was lame, he doesn't have a chiyuv. So what am I doing today? Nothing. So according to that, this guy would be pater. So there's no reason to include him. So according to that, Manda Amr, what are you going to say? Hakol la'asuyei mai. What is being included in our Mishnah with this extraneous language of Hakol? La'asuyei suma ba'achas me'enos. You see, there's a very similar cases. We're finding someone in the Mishnah, sort of. He's partially blind. He's partially lame on level, or he's partially a slave, right? So what about a summa? We said in the Mishnah that a person who's blind is pater from the mitzvah. What about if a person is blind in one eye? How blind do you have to be in order to be pater? So the Gemara wants to say, maybe we'll say that our Mishnah is saying that you're chayev as long as you have one eye. And that would mean not like the following Tana. With the Loki Tana, the Bryce says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Daboy, Omer Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, the following. Suma ba'achas me'enov pater min ha're'iyah. Suma in one eye, meaning you can see in one eye, can't see in the other, is pater from re'iyah. Shenemar yirah. Like I mentioned before, the pasuk, the word yirah, kol zechurcha, is written yud resh aleph hey, meaning if you didn't have nekudas, you would probably read he shall see. But the way it's read is yirah, seen, right? So it's either, so there's what's referred to as the kri, the way we read it, and then there's what's referred to as the ksiv, the way it's written, right? And both of those have they have value in terms of understanding what's being stated. So we understand from the fact that it can be read this way and it can be read that way, that there's a juxtaposition of those two ideas, that we want to treat the one who is seen the same way we want to treat the one who is doing the seeing. And we say like this, Kederech sheba liros, the same way you see, meaning this is referring to Hashem, the same way Hashem liroscha, Rashi changes the gear say, but the basic point is the same way you're seen by Hashem is with Hashem kiviyachol's both eyes, his eyes are good.
That's the way we should.
So too, kach ba liro, so too you need to be in a similar state when you are seen, your eyes need to be full, and therefore according to this Tana, you're pater if you only can see out of one eye. However, our Mishnah would be arguing if we say Hakol is coming to say you're chayiv and saying no, we don't make that drasha. And therefore, it's got to be 2 eyes and 2 eyes. But without 2 eyes, you're going to be pater. So what did we just say? We said that Hakol is coming to teach me something else. We gave 3 possibilities of what it is, but in each one of them, there was a problem. The first one was that it's not like Ravina, not like anybody. The second one, we said, okay, let's talk about not Evid. We're talking about someone who can't walk the first day, but on the second day he can walk. We said that only works according to half of the Manda Amrim who say that you'd be chayiv. According to the ones who say that it's going back to the first day, you'd be pater. That doesn't work. And then the third one is you're blind in one eye, but we said there's a Tana who has a pretty good drasha that seems to imply that wouldn't work. And we would like to have our Mishnah, which doesn't mention anyone arguing, we would like to have our Mishnah going according to everyone. So the Gemara implicitly understands that these answers are not very strong. So the Gemara says as follows. I'll give you a different answer. Let's go back to the first one. We're talking about a chatzi avid chatzi mitcharin. And what was the problem? The problem was, Ravina told us that you're going to be pater. So how could you have a Mishnah saying you're chayiv? So Gemara says like this. We're talking about an Eved who's a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chayrin. And you had a question. How could that be? Ravina told us that you're pater. How can you read our Mishnah to say you're chayiv? Gemara says loy kasha. That's not shver. That's not difficult. Why? Kan Commissioner Rishona, Kan Commissioner Achrayna. I'll say it outside and then we'll read it inside. What we're going to say is that when you look at the Mishnah, and you need to understand sort of the way the Mishnahs were compiled. The Mishnayos were not compiled when they were created. They were written only down many, many years later. Really, they're a collection of conversations, a collection of halachas. So when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi decided to put the Mishnayos together, he had to do it based on the information that he had at the time. So when they were initially putting together the Mishnayos, or maybe when they were saying them over, at that point in time, we'd be saying that the halacha is, Hakol chayavin, everyone's chayiv, right? Meaning, sorry, let me say that again. At that point in time, Ravina's halacha of a chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin being pater was true.
Send me the link. I got to go to my.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah,
But it doesn't question the accuracy of this. It wasn't written down. Like, I mean,
no.
it doesn't.
What do you mean?
Shabbat.
Cal, thanks a lot.
8:30, they do Dal Yomi?
Yeah.
Robert, put him on the chat with us.
Well, you have to get a normal chat, crazy chat. He's gonna make
All right.
decisions.
You want to be on the crazy one?
I definitely don't get the crazy.
No.
Don't be on the crazy chat.
I'm not.
He's too normal? He's too normal for us?
He's way too normal.
Really?
Yeah, he's a normal guy.
I thought I liked him.
Okay, let's continue. Yeah, let's continue. That's it. I want to move here. Okay. What are we saying? The Mishnah Rishona and the Mishnah Achrona is as follows. The Mishnah Rishona and Mishnah Achrona means that there was a point in time where a halacha was taught, and the teaching of that halacha changed the halacha of the Mishnah. We'll see it inside, and then I'll explain it outside.
What was first?
So it's a machlokes Rishonim. We'll explain with Rashi. So let's read it inside, and we'll see. So Gemara says like this: the Tanan, the Mishnah says as follows. I think it's a Mishnah Trumas, right? No, Adias. I thought it was in Trumas. Okay, Mishnah and Adias. Mishachatzi Eved v'chatzi ben Chayrin. This person who is a partial Eved and a partial free person. Basil says, what is he supposed to do? He's an Eved, and you have 2 masters. Sorry, you have one master, and right, he's owned by one, and the other one freed him. So what's he supposed to do? So he works for the one that he's a slave to one day, and then the other day he's free to his own, right? So he gets to work for himself. He works for the other guy Tuesday. Works for himself Wednesday. Works for the other guy Thursday. And Shabbos he's not working anyway, so he splits the 6 days of the week up, 3 for him, 3 for me. Again, assuming that the original partnership that they had was a 50-50 partnership. Now, that means, according to what is Beis Hillel effectively saying, Beis Hillel is solving the financial issue of how does this guy live and work and give himself parnasa, and at the same time he has a chiyuv to his baal. Amr lehem Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai said to them, "Takantem." I was gifted this Gemara. I'm not used to using these. Takantem. You fixed his Rebbe, meaning you fixed his master, meaning his master's solution problems are solved. He has the guy working for him when he's supposed to. This atzmei leit takantem, but this guy, he's sort of he's laid up over here. Why? Because his personal mitzvahs, his isurim are still intact. Lisa shifcha eino yochel. He can't marry a female slave. Why? Because the part of him that's free is not allowed to marry a slave. Bas chayrin eino yochel. He can't marry a free woman. Why? Because the part of him that's a slave can't marry the free Jewish girl, or really the free Jewish girl can't marry him. So therefore, this guy is stuck in between. He's in limbo. Libatel, what are we going to say? So he's not going to get married? That can't be. The world was created in order to fill it. Shenemar, like it says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't create the world to leave it empty. He created it to get filled. So what are you supposed to do? So Beis Shammai is pointing out, Beis Hillel, you've solved the problem, the financial issues that the master has. He's getting his worker, but this guy is sort of living in a really terrible situation where he basically can't do anything on his personal life. An idea that has been completely destroyed by non-religious people, taking the concept of tikkun olam and basically using it for everything, but really it's a very, very specific thing. The concept of tikkun olam, it's a sugya in and of itself. Exactly when do we say it? Who can say it? But Zok Beis Shammai,
repairing the world.
Meaning, but repairing the world. So what does that mean? We're not just don't wear tefillin because of tikkun olam. You can marry a guy because of tikkun olam. Homosexual.
Right. So
you have to know where to draw the line.
It's gotten watered down.
Yeah, it's one thing for the rabbis to come along and they make a pruzbul. You have other things. This is you're using a tikkun olam here to just now mipnei tikkun olam. It doesn't just, the rabbis don't just make I think maybe it would be good. It could be the understanding over here. Well, let's see what he says. What did they do? Rabbi, you force the man to free him. To free, right? So now the guy becomes 100% free. Now, we don't force him to lose money. If he gets paid for that, now where does that money come from? It comes from the slave himself once he's free and he owes it. I'm not sure. That's not clear. However, what is Beis Shammai suggesting? We don't want this guy to be in limbo. Therefore, we tell him to free him completely. We force the other owner to free him. He gets paid. And now this guy's 100% free. And now he can go marry whoever he wants, meaning a Jewish lady. Now, this was Beis Shammai's solution. V'chazru Beis Hillel lahoros kedivrei Beis Shammai, and Beis Hillel came to agree with Beis Shammai. So meaning, what the Gemara is saying in this Mishnah is that Bein Beis Hillel, Bein Beis Shammai, the halacha is that if you have a chatzi avid chatzi ben chorin, what is he really? He is someone who momentarily he's going to be free. That's really what is being stated here. Why? Because in order to solve his marriage issues, halachically, Beis Hillel are both in agreement. We are going to treat him today as if he's already free. That's how Rashi says it. The way Rashi says it is, even though he's not free yet, we halachically have the ability to treat him. Since we force the owner to free him, we treat him even today if he's free, and therefore we treat him as free. That means he's chayiv in mitzvahs re'iyah. So hakol in the Mishnah was added later.
Mishnah Shania.
Right. So when we said Mishnah Rishona and Mishnah Shnia, Ravina is exactly Mishnah Rishona that it's pater, and meaning the Mishnah that existed in the beginning didn't have the word hakol. It said Misha chayiv b'mitzvahs re'iyah. Who mi chayiv b'mitzvahs re'iyah? This guy. Who's not chayiv? All of these other people. Who was listed over there? What does it say in the Mishnah? It says, what's an evet she'einu meshukar? A chatzi evet chatzi min chayrin. The Mishnah says he's pater. That line in the Mishnah really should be taken out. Rashi says, Lashon of Rashi is, he says, u'mishnah shenishnis loizah. But once you have a Mishnah taught, we don't start jumbling up the words. The Gemara could do a chisuri mitzvah, but we're not going to do that. So therefore, that's how the Gemara comes out. So in the end of the day, what's hakol coming to include? A chatzi avid chatzi min chorin. Why? Because a chatzi avid chatzi min chorin is chayev. So when we get to the Gemara on Daf Daled, and we're discussing, you read that Gemara on its own, you'll conclude from the Gemara over there that a chatzi avid chatzi min chorin is pater. But now we're seeing over here that once you have Beis Hillel's change of the halacha, now the halacha, well, really it's Beishamai that Beisol will agree to, the halacha is going to be that a chatzi eved chatzi mecharon is chayiv. Okay, continue the Gemara. Let's talk about deaf people. Says in the Gemara, said in the Mishnah, chutz michereshot v'katan, that who's potter? Cheresh, a deaf person, and then a shota and a katan. A shota is a person with no sense, and a katan is someone under the bar mitzvah age. Kitani cheresh, it says cheresh, so I have to assume dumya the shota v'katan, that the cheresh of the Mishnah is exactly like the shota and the katan. Meaning what? Mas shota v'katan, the lav b'nei deya. These are people that halachically we treat with no das. Av cheresh, so too a deaf person is the lav bar deya. Meaning to say, what type of deaf person are we talking about? We're not talking about a deaf person who can speak, or a person who can. We're not talking about he can't hear but he can speak, or he can hear but not speak. We mean someone who can both not hear and not speak. Yeah. Ukimash malon kedetznan. The chiddush here is like the following Mishnah: Cheresh shedibru chachamim b'chol makom. Whenever Chazal talk about a cheresh, like cheresh of the cotton, what are they referring to? She'eno shomeya ve'eno medaber. He can do neither one of those things. He cannot speak and he cannot hear. And Rashi here says a very important line. Rashi says because a cheresh, he says like this: Hachi kim lehu l'Rabbanan. The rabbis understood the mi she'eno shomeya, a person who cannot hear, ve'eno cannot speak, the lav b'nei de'anu is not a bardas. Interesting lashon of Rashi. Rashi is saying the rabbis decided that they understood someone who can't speak and someone who can't hear has no das. Now nowadays we know that to be not necessarily true. I can meet someone who's deaf and someone who's a mute deaf person, and they can write. Helen was both mute and deaf and blind, and she was a very impressive woman. Meaning, 300 years ago, once we started teaching and having schools for the blind and schools for the deaf and once we started doing that, we started noticing that, you know what? These deafs are not stupid. They just can't speak. They can't hear. But if there was somehow a way to engage with them, right, they would be able to, sign language, whatever it is, be able to, grunt and move and whatever it is, they can contribute to society. They clearly have das. So there's a major discussion in the post. This Rashi is the start of the conversation, really. Major discussion of the poskim is a person who is a cheresh that cannot speak here, but in another, we can figure out that he has das from another way. There's some other thing that he's able to communicate. Is he chayiv in mitzvahs or is he pater in mitzvahs? This is a huge discussion. Shlomo Zalman effectively says if he could speak on any level, even if it's grunt, but it's clear from the way he speaks that he's, or maybe his parents can understand him, no one else can understand him, but his parents who are around him know what he means. That's as long as he can verbalize things. Shlomo Zalman says he's chayav in mitzvahs. Mamish cannot talk, and he mamish cannot hear. He doesn't feel comfortable saying that therefore he's going to be chayav in all mitzvahs, even though it's clear that he has this. Okay, continues. So what does it say? So it says from our Mishnah saying cheresh is like the katan, that he's completely pater. We'll say that the chiddush of our Mishnah is that all cheresh that's pater is always when he's missing both faculties. However, hamedaber ve'ena shemeya, if he could speak and not hear, or shemeya he can hear ve'ena medaber and he can't speak, chayiv. That is going to be the Gemara's understanding of what comes out of our Mishnah. And if that's the case, Tanina, our Mishnah would be teaching lahad Tana Rabbanan what's taught in the following brayso. The brayso says this: a person who speaks and can't hear. This is referred to, I think of as a lower case ches cheresh. This cheresh means he can't hear but he can speak. Shemeya ve'ena medaber, a person who can hear but can't speak. Zehu ilaim, that's a mute, right? Zeh v'zeh, meaning if he can hear and not if he can hear, if he can speak. If he has either one, either he can hear and not speak, or he can speak and not hear. They're like a regular person. Chayiv and mitzvahs, they have das, and therefore they're chayiv. Why are you the one who can speaks but can't hear a cheresh? And a shemea ve'eno medaber zehu ilam. Why are those the words that you use? This is the pasuk t'chsev. Ve'ani and I kecheresh. I'm like a cheresh loy eshma who cannot hear. Who ke'ilim lo yiftach piv. And like an ilim who cannot open his mouth. That's where you see that ilim goes with the one who can't speak, and a cheresh goes with the one who can't hear. V'iboy yisema. It's a kida'amri inshi. It's the phrase that people say. Ishtakel milule. Ishtaka milule literally means his words were taken. But if you take the words ishtaka milule and you put it together, you sort of can see the word ilam in there. Ishtakel milule, ilam is in there. So an ilam is one who cannot speak. The Gemara's understanding, what comes out really in summary is when the Mishnah says a cheresh is pat, In Shas, in general, a cheresh being pater, it means a cheresh who both cannot hear and cannot speak. We'll learn a little bit more, and then we'll hold it for the day. It said in the Brisa. It said in the Brisa, just above. What did it say? It says in the Brisa, medaber ve'ena shemea sheveina medaber chayiv, that if you have either one of the faculties, you're considered chayiv in all of mitzvahs. Ask the Gemara. V'hatanya have a Brisa. The Brisa says medaber ve'ena shemea medaber pater, meaning the Gemara is bringing the Brisa. There's a Brisa that seems to imply that in order to be chayiv, you need to have both faculties. Here it's saying if you're missing either one, you're pater. Whereas we're understanding from our Mishnah that no, you'd be chayiv if you have either one of the faculties. And in order to be pater, you need to be missing both. So I'm a ravina, v'isei merava, chisuri michsara v'hachitani. We have to do a little patchwork in the Mishnah. And this patchwork to explain a couple of things. This is the new way to read the Mishnah. Hakol chayav in b'ri'iyah. Everyone is chayiv in ri'iyah. And the way we explained earlier, by the way, that'll include chatziyav and chatzim and chayr. U'b'simcha, and not only that, they're also chayiv in simchas yantiv, which now we're introducing for the first time when we mentioned the Hagdama, the mitzvah of every day to eat meat from a carbon. Who's not chayiv in that? Chutz micheresh, hamedaber ve'ena shemeya ve'ena medaber, shepater min hariyah. Right? A cheresh, if you have only one of these two faculties, you are now pater from re'iyah. And why are you pater from re'iyah? Because we'll see in a minute, as we move, what the makar for why a person only has one of the faculties is going to be pater. Ve'afal pisha pater min hariyah. Even though this cheresh ena medaber or medaber ena shemeh is going to be pater from re'iyah, he is still chayiv in simcha. So everyone's chayiv in simcha and re'iyah, except the cheresh, who's he can hear and not speak, or he could speak and not hear. He's not chayiv in re'iyah, but he is chayiv in simcha. If he's full-fledged cheresh, meaning he can't hear, can't speak, then he, v'shota, and a shota, and a katan are pater min simcha, even from simcha. Why? Because they're pater from all mitzvahs. Hoyel u'betur mikol mitzvahs hamuras b'torah, because they're a cheresh, shota, v'katan. We always talk about Tanya namihachi, a brisa that supports this idea. Hakol chayav miri'iyah u'besimcha chutz micheresh ve'ena shemeya ve'ena medaber, like we just said. Shepturim min ha'ri'iyah, right? But they're only pater from ri'iyah. V'afal picha pater min ha'ri'iyah chayiv b'simcha. They're chayiv in simcha. Ve'eshe'enu le'shemeya v'loy medaber, which would be someone who's missing everything, that he and Vishota V'Katan and Vishota V'Katan, all three of these people are people who don't have das. P'turim and af mina simcha, not only re'iyah, but even simcha. Why? Hoyelu p'turim mikol mitzvahs ha'amuras b'torah. Now the Brisa continues, but I think this is a good point to stop, and we'll pick up from the Mishnah. But the basic sort of summary of what we basically said is we have four mitzvahs. You have Aliyah Regel, you have the carbon re'iyah, the Olas re'iyah, you have the Shalmi Chagiga, and then you have potentially a Shalmi Simcha. We saw in the Gemara that Hakol in the Mishnah is coming to teach me what? It's coming to teach me a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Mincharin that he's chayiv, not like Ravina's initial thought, but rather the Maskana is that he's chayiv. And then we saw also that the Cheresh in the Mishnah that's chayiv or pater is only referring to if he's pater, if he's completely pater from all of mitzvahs, is going to be if he has no hearing and no speaking. But for the din of Aliyah L'Regel, then either one, if he can't hear and he can speak, or if he can't speak and he can hear, he's going to be pater. But Simcha is chayiv, because you don't need to have the... Now, the Gemara is going to bring a story in a minute. It's a very interesting story of two Talmidei Chachamim who were both mute and deaf, or maybe no, that they were not deaf. They were mute. Stuttering, you talking about?
No, it's with his name.
Who?
The
story?
The famous blind person.
Oh, Rav Yosef was the famous blind person. That's blind. It's different.
Oh, okay.
What about a shchoita?
Ask Kevin how you should answer that.
Shkoyach, guys, Kyle, whoever's on the Zoom, thanks so much.
He'll give you some
Thank
good
you.
insight.